in different scriptures, including in Vandita Sutra, where it says Sanka Kankha Vigicha Pasansa Thasatva Kulingisu Sammatasaya Padikpati Sim Sammam. Now, we just briefly saw the 5 different atichars, but we're yet to look at all of them properly. So I think we started discussing Shankar at elaborately. So we'll continue with that. Now, when we talk about Shankar, as the name suggests, it refers to doubting the word of God, doubting what is written in the scriptures, doubting any part of the religion. And we need a separate distinction between doubting it, just not believing it, believing something to be true, or wondering whether something is true or not. So that is one type, and this is the relevant type. Whereas there's another kind of Shankar, which pertains to having a question with respect to something, because we're still learning right now. We're in a learning process. So it is very natural for people like us to have questions every now and then, why is it like this? Why is it not like this? How does this happen? How does that happen? And so on. So that is something that is done out of curiosity, and that is perfectly fine, because a naturally curious person who has a genuine inclination to learn dharma, will ultimately get his answers and he can progress further. Now, speaking of Shankar, Shankar is of 2 types. So this is the scriptures classified. There's something called Sarva Shankar, there's something called Desh Shankar. So Sarva Shankar refers, Sarva as the name suggests, it refers to something as a whole, right? So Sarva Shankar refers to when a person has doubts about the existence of dharma as a whole, such as is there something really, does something like Jainism even exist in the world? Or is dharma, is religion even important in our day-to-day life? Something, which is a doubt about the entire concept at large. That is Sarva Shankar. On the other hand, we have something called Desh Shankar, which relates to a particular topic about one aspect of the religion, such as would the Tirthankars have said this, would they have said that, would they have emphasized so much on fasting, would they have emphasized so much on charity. So doubts about these are known as Desh Shankar. So obviously both of them are wrong, and which is why this Shankar is the main atichar, because usually what happens is the remaining 4 atichars, they usually, I'm emphasizing on the word usually, they usually rise from the atichar called Shankar. So a couple of things that we need to discuss here. We discussed what Deshak and Sarva Shankar is. Similarly, after that, the Granthkar Bhagwans, they also talk about how Shankar rises, and they also talk about ways you can get over it. So like we saw earlier in one of our one of the very initial sessions about Samyak Darshan, we saw there's something called Sanshayik Mithyatva. It's essentially just a form of Mithyatva Mohaniya Karma that leads to doubts. So number 1, you shouldn't have doubts. That's ideal, but do you think it's possible for everyone not to have doubts? Of course not, because not everyone has perfect Samyak Darshan. So from time to time they could have doubts. And now so first the Purvacharya said don't have doubts in the first place. But if you end up having them, then they've also shown ways to get rid of them. So mainly when we're talking about these things, I'm keeping in mind the Tika, the commentary written on Yoga Shastra, the 2nd chapter. So the person thinks that when we measure something or when we judge something, then there are certain elements, there are certain matters that our sight won't reach. There's some things that are very limited when it comes to the human perception. And for stuff like that, you have to trust the agams, you have to trust the scriptures, you have to trust the perfect word, because without that, you won't ever understand the truth. So an important point here is there are things that we can perceive by logic, by arguments, by reasoning. But then there are a huge lot of things that are beyond logic, beyond any rational perception. That doesn't mean they're illogical. It's just something that's not relevant to logic, or something that can't be understood by logic. And mainly, so for example, I can use logic, I can use arguments to prove to you that something called karma exists. But beyond that, when it comes to discussing the color, the shape, the size of particles of karma, then obviously I cannot use any rational arguments for that. Nor can I draw any analogies. I can't do absolutely anything about it, because these things are something that only the infinite, the infinite knowing person can speak. It's as simple as that. Similarly, I can prove that there is Jeev in Vanaspati, like there's life in plants. But when it comes to, when someone comes up and says, okay, here's a potato, show me that there are infinite lives in this potato, I cannot do that. See, if you take it under a microscope too, what you see aren't the infinite lives in the potato, they're the Bendriya Jeev, or the bacteria that you can see, the microorganisms that you can see. But the Jeev that we believe in the potato, and that's the main reason for not eating vegetables like those, they are Anantkai, and no kind of instrument is ever going to be able to see them. Only the Anantgani Bhagavans can see it. So in cases like these, you simply have to believe what they've said. Of course, why should you believe it over other things? Because there are so many, most other things that you've already reached a point wherein everything that can be perceived by logic, that those things can be perceived by logic, which isn't the case with other religions at all. So often what happens is, even though we generally know all of these things, we tend to forget these tiny details. So this leads to the rise of Shankar. And when this happens, the Jeev realize the Jeev. So Acharya Bhagavat is showing ways to get over it, to get over the doubts we have in our head. And I think this is pretty relevant, because every single one of us, we have doubts every now and then. Is this even true? Like, is this even meaningful? Of course, most of the time we're fine with practicing jains, but I think I can confidently say that we all have phases wherein we doubt even the most basic of stuff. So the Jeev, at such a point when he's having doubts, he thinks of the various factors by which Shankar rises, when various factors by which such doubt is created in the mind. And the first one is limited intellect, limited intellectual capacity. So everyone, compared to the previous times, we're in the Avsarpani right now, and most Jeev that are present right now have a very limited understanding, as opposed to the understanding and intellect that our ancestors, our Purvacharyas possessed. So that is one factor. Similarly, another factor is the lack of an Acharya who can explain those intricate concepts to you in a perfect way. Such as, there is, let's take some difficult concept, a very intricate concept pertaining to Karma Granth, pertaining to karmas essentially. And you have scholars around you, you have other sadhu bhagavans around you, but there are certain things that, without the help of a particular Acharya Bhagavant or a sadhu bhagavant, you cannot understand those things. And you don't seem to have any sadhu of that sort to come and answer your questions around you. So the lack of such an Acharya or sadhu. The third one is the profundity, the depth of the matter that you are studying. Now look, the agams, they're firstly large, they're voluminous, and each statement in the agams has infinite meanings. So getting to the core of it, understanding the essence of it is really, something that's really difficult. And not understanding it clearly also leads to, Shankar. The fourth one is obviously the rise of Jnana Varnya Karma. We know that Jnana Varnya Karma is something, it's one of the first types of the main 8 types of karma. And Jnana Varnya Karma specializes in obscuring your knowledge. So this is essentially the job of Jnana Varnya Karma. And everyone has a limit, everyone has varying degrees of Jnana Varnya Karma with them. The more karma you have, the lesser your knowledge is, or the lesser your grasping power is. So a person who has, and most of us at the moment obviously have Jnana Varnya Karma, because without that, when Jnana Varnya Karma is completely gone, you attain Keval Gyan. That is complete knowledge. So we all have varying degrees of Jnana Varnya Karma, and because of that, we can have doubts in the Jain faith. And the fifth one is the lack of a reason and the lack of an example to explain that particular matter. Now, like we discussed the example of, the different colors of karma. We saw that karmic particles have their own colors, and we simply have to trust that the appearance of those particles, the way the infinitely knowing people, Mahapurush have mentioned it to us. Now, for matters like these, there's no way that you can ask why. Why is the color red? Why is the color of these particles green? Or what's the, is there an analogy that you can draw to compare this and that? It's impossible. So because of these 5 reasons, lack of intellect, I'll just summarize this up. So we were discussing Samyak Darshan, which is essentially, roughly speaking, absolute faith in the right God, the right kind of gurus, and the right kind of dharma. Essentially, the God, gurus, and dharma that are believed in Jainism. So we're discussing the 5 atichars, which are the 5 stains that don't violate, but they eventually, they destroy your Samyak Darshan, they destroy your right perception. So we were looking at the first one called Shanka, which is doubting the word of God. And we were looking at 5 reasons by which a person doubts the word of God. So coming back, lack of intellect, lack of an acharya who can explain that concept to you, profundity of the matter that is to be understood, the rise of Jnana Varnya Karma, and the 5th one is absence of a reason or an example. Such as another thing you can take is, we believe that the world was never created, and of course you can prove that logically and stuff. But then when you keep on asking why, and how did this happen, how did that happen, and so on and so forth, you reach a point where things just are. So beyond that, if you question why, you won't exactly get an answer. Obviously, prior to that, we have enough arguments to very clearly express that this world was never created by anyone, and it's been running eternally forever, and it will continue to do so. So this makes it very clear that the person thinks that, because of these reasons, I might not be understanding, but that doesn't mean that the word of God is wrong, because there's a law in this shastra, like we discussed the last time. Purush Vishwasa, Vachan Vishwasa. When you trust the person, you also trust what he says. And Jineshwar Paramatmas have destroyed love, hatred, and ignorance, which are the 3 factors, by which a person is, a person lies, or a person makes any dishonest statement, a statement that is untrue. When you destroy all these 3 reasons, you obviously, without the cause, there can't be the effect. So a person who has destroyed these 3 factors that cause a person to speak dishonestly will never lie, or will never speak something that is dishonest. So we need to think of these 5 factors and contemplate. It could be one of these factors, or it could be a mix of, more than one factor, because of which I'm doubting the word of God. But honestly, there's no reason for me to do so, because Janeshwar Paramatmas have always been engaged in doing favors in the entire world. So there's really no reason for them to lie. In fact, when we talk about Tirthankars, when they take Diksha, and after they take Diksha, they do not start preaching. They wait till they attain Keval Gyan. They wait till they become omniscient. Because when you are initiating something, when you are establishing something new, or you just when you're creating something new, it has to be perfect, because this is the vehicle that is going to lead several other people on the same path as you. So they make sure that they do not preach, because even though they have so much knowledge before attaining Keval Gyan, they do not want to make even the tiniest mistake. So they wait till all these three factors of speaking dishonestly are destroyed, and then when they attain Keval Gyan, they finally start preaching. So, right, so similarly, when we discussed that Gneya Padarth, or the matter that is to be known, requires a lot of, it's very profound, so not everyone can understand it. You can think of the example wherein Bhadrabahu Sami, who was the Acharya who composed Uvasagaram Stotra, he was giving vachnas, he was conveying, orally transmitting the agams to all different shishyas, and there were 500 sadhus, 500 disciples who were learning stuff from him. But one by one, eventually everyone couldn't take it anymore, because now here it isn't that those disciples are incapable, or that the guru is incapable of giving or teaching those shishyas, but it's simply the fact that the matter itself was too profound to be understood, and only Sthulabhadra Swami alone could learn what was necessary, and that was the example essentially. So Hemchandra Sen Maharaj says that in such a scenario, a person thinks Sarvagnya Matam Avidatham, which is the faith of Sarvagnya Paramatma, of the omniscient Paramatma, is undoubtedly true. And so that's essentially about Shanka. Now, Shanka, as I said, is the core Atichar, and it leads to other Atichars. It's the main reason here is, even when you have a glass of milk, a drop of poison is enough to contaminate the entire milk if you don't do anything about it. So similarly, once you have Shanka and you don't do anything to take it out, to destroy it, to clear your doubts, to get your questions answered, then your doubts are further, they keep on reproducing, and ultimately you just lose faith. So that's about Shanka. And two more mentions in scriptures. One mention is that a person who does not believe in even one letter of the scripture is Mithya Drashti. I said this before, I'll say it again. We all talk about compromising things, compromising our differences and becoming united. Of course, that's possible when everyone adheres to the same scripture and they believe in the letter and spirit of the scripture. Like when it comes to the laws of the nation, you're supposed to believe in and follow each law in letter and spirit. So likewise, now the next Atichar is Kanksha. And when we were talking about Kanksha, we saw two terms. We saw Lokik Mithyatva and we saw Lokuttar Mithyatva. Lokuttar Mithyatva, do you guys remember what both of those terms were? Or do you want to just rewind that for you? Okay, so Lokik Mithyatva is Mithyatva, or wrong faith that pertains to this world, this society, or the religions that are religions apart from Jainism. To understand, Lokik is something that is used for other religions, religions present in this world, whereas Lokuttar is a term which has the meaning of ethereal. It is out of this world or above this world. And the Lokuttar religion is Jainism. So there are Mithyatva, or there are there's a state of wrong belief associated with each of both of these types. Now, in case of Lokik Mithyatva, Lokik Mithyatva refers to going to, other gods and goddesses, bowing down to different gods and goddesses who aren't Jain or who aren't Samajdrashti, like Ghantakarna Mahavir or Kanpati or Vishnu, Brahma, Shankar, and so on. And Lokotar Mithyatva, now as opposed to that, Lokotar Mithyatva is different. It pertains to our own gods and gurus, but it is still Mithyatva. So we'll look at that. Now, like you have Lokik Mithyatva with respect to gods of other religions, you also have Lokik Mithyatva with respect to the gurus of other religions, such as, people go to, say, Sai Baba, he was a guru technically, for fulfillment of their wishes. People go to random Babas and fakirs and so on. So all of these are examples of Lokik Mithyatva. Whereas in case of Lokotar Mithyatva, a person who has the expectation of worldly, any kind of worldly expectations from Tirthankars, from gods and goddesses who are who are accepted in Jainism, then that is Lokotar Mithyatva, pertaining to gods. Similarly, when a person goes to Jain sadhus, with the expectation, people do this even today. They go with the expectation of getting a child or getting money, oh Gurudev, show me the way to make more money or crap like that. That is also Lokotar Mithyatva pertaining to gurus. Now, both of these are awfully bad, so one needs to be careful. And this care comes with ensuring that we do not ask for materialistic things from any kind of god, be it Samagdrashti or be it Mithyadrashti, be it Tirthankars or be it any other gods or goddesses. And there's this Granth created by Ratnashekhar Sri Maharaj about 500-600 years ago. I forgot the name. He talks about Lokik Mithyatva and Lokotar Mithyatva at length in there. So it's essentially the same thing we talked, but a few important points that I really like there. A very few specific points. One of them was the fact he clearly addressed the fact that there are people who worship specifically idols of one specific Tirthankar, and he gave the common examples of Shantinath Bhagwan and Parshvanath Bhagwan. They're very famous in the Jain community. So people, they worship them specially so that they have prosperity in their life. They get their desired mundane fruits and so on. They make pilgrimages to Samet Shikhar or any other tirths of these two Tirthankars, or any other Tirthankar for that matter, with a view to earn any kind of mundane benefit. So that is Lokotar Mithyatva pertaining to gods again. Similarly, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term Dadawadi. It's a term more commonly associated with the Khatargach, but then it's associated with the Tapagach as well. So a Dadawadi is essentially a Guru Mandir. It's a place where you have footprints or an idol of a Guru who has passed away, and people go there. So they have their own set of miracles associated with these places. And these are Jain Gurus, by the way, obviously, like proper sadhus, proper true Gurus. But people go to, people make a visit to their shrines, to where they have died, and hope for, materialistic benefits. And they kind of make a vow, if I pass my exams, I'll offer you this, I'll offer that, I'll make an offering of so many rupees or so on. So all of these are associated with Lokotar Mithyatva with respect to Guru Bhagwans. So Kanksha again. Now Kanksha, Lokotar Mithyatva is included in Kanksha, which is why we discuss Lokotar Mithyatva. Yes, Harsh.
I have seen Siddha Dhwaja on Dadawadis.
So that's okay. I mean, that's the ideal way to do it anyway, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That is how it's usually done. Uh, because even with respect to Dev Devis, when you have shrines dedicated to them, the dhaja on there is the dhaja of Siddh Bhagwans. So I think this is permitted. I don't know for what reason, or maybe there's some other meaning to it. But
But if I'm not mistaken, Guru Mandirs normally don't have dhajas.
yeah, that's true. I mean, like if you look at Smriti Maharaj, for example,
Exactly, huh?
there's no dhaja on there. So I think, yeah, it's better not to have it. And that seems more correct too.
So if we take Dadawadi as a Guru Mandir of Jim Chandra Saraswati Mahasab, it ideally shouldn't have any dhaja. I mean, if it is a Guru Mandir.
I guess so, but I think it's better to ask an Acharya Bhagan for an opinion before jumping to a conclusion about these issues for obvious reasons. Because this is widespread, so I can't be very sure before commenting about it. Okay, here's your question. Are there any after effects shown in the Shastras where they show that this Lokottama is not good? Yeah, I mean, there's countless examples of these. So the basic effect is that you lose on your Samyak Darshan. And that's the main after effect.
I
That's
mean, other than that, like,
What
is
whether-
there any incident which shows that, like, you have done this and okay, this is happening? Any drashtan on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, so many of them. So, okay, all Vasudevs. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Trishashti Shalaka Purush. There are 63 legendary figures in Jainism. They include the 24 Tirthankars, the 12 Chakravartis who conquer all the 6 continents on Earth. Then you have Vasudevs and Prati Vasudevs who conquer 3 and 3 continents each. Now, every Vasudev and Prati Vasudev becomes a Vasudev and Prati Vasudev because of Lokota Mithyatva. Essentially, what we call Niyanu. When you barter your religious sadhana in exchange for materialistic stuff. Literally every Vasudev and Baldev and every Chakravarti. So Chakravartis could go to Moksha or they could go to Devlok. But if they do a Niyanu, if they do this, if they engage in Lokottara Mithyatva, then they will definitely go to hell after they become a Chakravarti. So what happens is when you trade your dharma for materialistic fruits, then you will get those fruits, but at the cost of your dharma. So it will become very difficult for you to attain dharma again, which is why literally, as I said, every Vasudev goes to hell because in their previous births, they take Diksha and then they compromise or they do some sadhana and they compromise it with at the cost of their dharma. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't see a bigger effect than losing Mithyatva and just roaming around in the world further, where when you had a chance to, get Nirvana so easily. So, Kangsha again is of 2 types. One is Sarvavishak Kangsha, which pertains to so Kangsha, I forgot to define it. Kangsha refers to wishing for or having an inclination towards other faiths. But Lokottama is included in that, so remember that. Now, there is a Sarvavishak Kangsha, which pertains to having an inclination for all religions. And there's Deshvishak Kangsha, which refers to having an inclination for a specific set of religions. Now, to give an example, as mentioned in Yoga Shastras, chapter 2, Shlok 17, and the commentary on that. So it says that, so the person here, he could have thoughts around, this issue, for example. This is just an example. There could be endless possibilities. So it says, Sugat is Buddha. The Buddha also has prescribed his own monastic code. He had his own set of monks. They still exist today. We all know that. So the Buddha has preached to his monks that you should, you can sleep. You should sleep in a comfortable bed. When you wake up in the morning, you can drink whatever is necessary. You should have food in the afternoon. In the evening, again, you can have liquids which suit you. And around midnight, you can have stuff like grapes or sugar, sweet or whatever. And even after doing all of these things, the Buddha has attained nirvana. This is mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures. So I don't know if you guys know the background of this preaching in Buddhism. It is said that the Buddha meditated a lot and he fasted a lot initially. They call it starving, and he didn't attain enlightenment, but then he found the middle way, which is the way between two extremes, and he attained enlightenment and so on and so forth. But he discouraged starving, for that matter. And his scripture. So the point here is, his scriptures mention that even after eating and doing all of these things, without doing any kind of tapasya, I went to moksha. Buddha went to moksha. So even you, my followers, can do so. And similarly, there are hermits, there are sages, there are Brahmins of other religions, and they engage in all weird kinds of sensual pleasures. And even after doing all of that, they say that they can attain moksha. So after coming to know of all of these things, a person at times he could have an inclination. If this is all, I mean, this is also good, right? Then what's the whole fuss about practicing so much, doing so much stuff, or doing so many austerities? So stuff like this, wishing for aspects like these of other religions is kangsha. Now, we discussed the 5 characteristics of Samyak Darshan, and the first of that was astikya, which is absolute, unmovable faith, immovable faith. A person who has a very strong quality of astikya ideally wouldn't get into the atyachar of kangsha. And when this kangsha dosh appears, we can think about several incidents. Look, Aryan Paramatmas are going to attain Kiyaljan anyway, no matter what they did. But yet to shed their karma, let's consider Mavar Swami. He engaged himself in extreme tapasya for 12.5 years. And this is the way he preached to everyone else too. So like the Nishtaya Dharma is important, the Vyavhar Dharma is also important. Just like having knowledge or Gnyan is important, implementing it in the form of Kriyas is equally important. A person who focuses only on Nishchay Nyaya, like a lot of sects today do, like, Dada Bhagwan or Srimad Rajchandra or Kanji Swami, while negating Vyavhar Nyaya, then they're essentially cutting off one half of the religion and they become Mithyadashi with that. So with respect to that, Upadhyaya Vishwajit Maharaj in his 125 Gatha Stavan, he says it very simply in Gujarati, Nishchaya Drashti Dhari Hriday Padeje Vyavhara Re. So he says the mark is to aim for Nishchay Nyaya, which is the higher level, while still practicing the Vyavhar Nyaya. Because if you stick to only Vyavhar Nyaya without the aim of Nishchay Nyaya, you're going nowhere. But if you only stick to Nishchay Nyaya, then there's nothing that you're going to be able to do, because Nishchay Nyaya doesn't focus on activity as much. Okay. So moving on, when the kangsha dosh appears, the person thinks that if there were a way like this, then there would be no reason that for Paramatma to prescribe such a hard monastic code. He could have simply shown the same way as the Buddha did, and by having such thoughts, he can escape the dosh of kangsha. Now the third atichar or the third dosh is vichikitsa. We saw that vichikitsa is of 2 types. So we'll look at the first one now. Vichikitsa is essentially, in the first meaning, doubting or questioning the fruit, the result of your dharmic activities. This is different from Shanka, wherein you are doubting certain elements. Vichikitsa is specifically related to, questioning if you will get the desired results or the desired fruits of your dharmic activity, be it any kind of activity. And with respect to that, a person can have many thoughts. So all of these are very clearly mentioned in the scriptures too. Such as, I'm fasting so much, I'm doing so much tapasya, but am I actually doing karma nishra by doing that? Is it actually benefiting me? Will it help me in some way or the other? So you have a doubt about the fruit here, if the karma nishta is happening or not. This is Vichikitsa. And then the person further thinks, this is all mentioned in Yogashastra's Tika, by the way. The person further thinks that when a person, he tries to plow the field and he sows seeds in the field, it is not necessary that the crop always comes to fruition. Some of the crops just won't emerge. He won't get, not every seed that he gets will, yield him enough fodder or whatever. And he thinks of that and he compares it to this. So he thinks that in the past, we had a stronger physique, we had a stronger mental capacity, we had more power to practice dharma. And now you see everyone has a fickle mind, everyone's body can barely take it. So in such a case, do you think that whatever we do will actually come to fruition? I mean, how is it possible? All of these thoughts are pertaining to Vichikitsa, because Tirthankars have made it very clear that when you do when you do any kind of activity, you're supposed to do it yathashakti, that is to the best of your ability. And when you do it to the best of your ability, it will certainly yield fruit. So that is the first half of Vichikitsa. Now the second half of Vichikitsa is in the form of ninda or criticism. Criticism not of just anyone, but particularly with respect to Muni Bhagwans who have a very beautiful code of conduct in our religion. So, commenting stuff like these people don't even bathe, and they're sweating and the sweat mixes with the dirt on their body, and because of that they're stinking, and it's so repulsive. I don't want to be near them. What would be the big deal if they used boiled water and cleaned themselves off? If it's just boiled water, then there shouldn't be any harm in it. So all of this is in the form of Vichikitsa, thinking about how the Brahmins keep themselves very pure using water every now and then to clean themselves, whereas Jain sadhus are just disgusting. So that is in the form of Vichikitsa. And Vichikitsa usually happens when you have materialistic expectations from dharma again, because it is not necessary that the dharma that you do will give you instant fruit. I mean, spiritually, yes, of course, but we know that dharma can give you materialistic benefits too. Although it is wrong to do dharma for materialistic benefits, even when you do dharma for spiritual benefits, those materialistic benefits come fly and, they're attached to you. So a person who does it with these expectations, often what happens is, there is, of the 8 types of karma, there is something called antray karma. Antray refers to a hindrance, a barrier or an obstruction. So antray karma is essentially the karma which will hinder you from getting something, from giving something. There are 5 types of antray karma. Now, a lot of times people actually have very strong antray karma, and no matter what they do, how much dharma they practice, there's still time for the antray karma to get destroyed. So they do not get the desired results. And when this happens, they start doubting the fruit of these kriyas. I wished for more money and why haven't I got it? I did so much tapasya, I still haven't got it. Do you think this stuff actually yields any kind of benefit at all? And so on. Which is why every now and then we mention that a Samyajachi soul is happy, is, peaceful in all circumstances, be it a scenario where he has all the richest in the world, or be it a scenario where he's the poorest person. So the only way for that is to be careful with respect to not wishing for such stuff, because the other spiritual benefits such as peace of mind, etc., peace of mind or contentment of mind, all of these benefits can be seen instantly. Although one thing here is, when you do dharma with a very strong intensity, then the fruit is also yielded in a very small amount of time. Like you'll get instant results. One thing I wish to mention with respect to Shanka is that often, when we're doing some kriya, be it going to the temple and doing darshan, or doing pratikraman, or just doing swadhyay, we kind of lose track and we blame it on those things, such as uh, I'll give you examples. So there are many people today, and the majority of the youth today, they do not go to temples, citing that they're not getting any kinds of feelings, so they blame it on the pratima. They blame it on Jineshwar Bhagwan's pratima or the temple as a whole, and they believe that there's nothing, there's no power or there's no energy. I'm not feeling any kind of good vibes, so it's all of this is useless. Or it could be something like Swadhyay. They're learning new stuff, but they're like, oh no, this is not bringing a change in me at all. I'll just read some self-motivation books instead and whatever. So they blame it on that article, that object, or that element of dharma, whereas the fault is within themselves. And one thing to understand here is all of these different activities cannot be enjoyed in the first attempt, always. Often what happens is you need to constantly practice them every now and then, and then you become a master of that concerned activity and you start enjoying it. This is very ubiquitous with respect to most things that you do, be it a sport, be it learning, playing an instrument, whatever. It could be anything. So, with respect to that now, with respect to the fact that these elements of dharma themselves are very powerful and you do not feel anything when you come in contact with them, we need to think that there were abhavya souls, which are souls that are incapable of attaining moksha ever at any point in time. Even they have met Tirthankar Paramatmas. There have been so many people who have met Tirthankars when they were alive in the past, and they have listened to them, they have probably touched them or whatever. But regardless of that, they had no change in them. Now, the fault is not the Tirthankar's fault. Similarly, the fault is not the Tirthankar's Pratima's fault or the fault of the Tirthankar scriptures. The fault is within us, so we need to work on that. So, yeah, okay, moving back to Vichikitsa, it was of two types. One is doubting if you'll ever reap the benefits of the dharma that you do. And the second was that pertaining to the criticism of sadhus about unclean or about how repulsive they are to you. And so that's Vichikitsa. With respect to these three, are there any questions? Please let me know.
You mentioned that asking questions is also a sort of not a good thing.
Oh no, I think you might have joined in late because I made it very clear that there's two types of Shanka. One is doubting in the sense, doubting if it's actually true or not. But there's a kind of doubt or a set of questions that emerge from the very quality of curiosity, and those are not a problem.
Okay.
Right. So now the fourth dushan or the fourth adichar of Samyak Darshan is prashansa of mithya drashtis, praising mithya drashtis. Now this kind of demands a decent understanding, because there is something called Gurnanurag, which is an attitude, an inclination to have appreciation, have love for the virtues of everyone, be it the tiniest virtue. And based on that, we also have 4 bhavnas. So there are 16, but we're taking the last 4. Maitri bhavna, Pramod bhavna, Karunya bhavna, and Madhyast bhavna. Of this, the second bhavna is Pramod bhavna. Pramod refers to feeling happy, feeling delighted. And this bhavna is a contemplation which a Jain or a Jain should have in their mind whenever they see anything that is whenever they see any kind of virtue in any person, be it any kind of person. So this is Pramod bhavna. And this atichar, prashansa of mithya drashtis, looks like the exact opposite of that, which is not exactly the case. So there is something called Anumodna and there's something called Prashansa. Now both are synonymous, but they actually differ in some ways. When you're doing Anumodna in this context, you're appreciating the virtues of the person in your heart, and you're happy that that X person has that virtue, and that's amazing. But at the same time, everything that you can do Anumodna of, you cannot do the Prashansa of those things. Prashansa is vocally expressing appreciation for that person's virtues or anything about that person. So praising Mithya Drashtis is what is the latter part here. You can certainly you can certainly respect and in fact feel happy that even Mithya Drashtis have these qualities, and at times, not at times, like in fact always our scriptures have taken note of Mithya Drashti Jeev when they have qualities, such as when Mahavaswami Bhagavan had not attained Samyaktva at all, when he was Mithya Drashti, his soul in the first birth. The scriptures take note of how generous he was, how he was welcoming of guests, how he offered food to a guest every day before he had his own lunch, and so on. But that doesn't mean that you can praise Mithya Drashtis openly. At times, when a person has to, for certain unknown reasons, it could be pressure of any sort, when a person has to praise Mithya Drashtis, a person also has the responsibility then to disclose or to expose the false qualities of that person. So the ideal scenario is not to do it, because when you publicly praise Mithya Drashtis, people don't see that you're only praising that quality. They see that you're praising the person as a whole, and because of that, a lot of people can actually deviate from Samyak Darshan, from the true path, and they could get diverted towards Mithyatva. So this is one reason why Mithya Drashtis cannot be praised. And as opposed to that, you can do Anumodna of any kind of person, be it, be it a Jain or a non-Jain, whoever. And on the other hand, again, coming back to Mithya Drashtis, the analogy that is given is when, a thief steals something from your place and he leaves a note. This is my name, this is my address, I've stolen this from you. Now, he's stolen your possessions and he's left his details with you. So he's honest, but he's a thief. So obviously, in an ideal scenario, you're not going to talk to people, proclaim to people about how, you're how that thief was so honest, how he was so ethical, but you're going to mainly focus on how this person stole all your belongings. At times, when you have to give a fair view, you might have to disclose both information, but that's different. So yeah, so that's Mithya Drashti, the Prashansa of Mithya Drashtis. I hope the fourth dosh is clear. We'll move on to the fifth one in that case.
Pash, I have a question. We say like thoughts and words both are equally harmful, right? So if you are abusing someone in your mind, it will attract karma, and if you are abusing someone in words, it will be harmful also, right? So why is it not applicable to Anumodna and Prashansa?
The reason is, when you're doing Anumodna, it is very clear to you, how you're going on about it. Basically, say, okay, and in fact, this is mentioned. I can give you scripture examples about these. We know Patanjali, not the brand, the guy Patanjali, the sage Patanjali, who composed the Yoga Sutras. Now, a lot of his concepts were really nice. So Haribhadra Simha Sahib has done Anumodna of some of his concepts, but when it came to praising him publicly, not only did he show the good concepts, but he also refuted everything that Patanjali's statement, everything that was false in Patanjali's literature, while also expressing that he's Mithya Drashti. So both are different, because when you're doing Anumodana, you're only concerned with the virtues of that person. When you're doing Prashansa, you're exposing that person's good qualities to the world, unaware or not taking care to ensure that the bad qualities are also highlighted. Because if you don't do that, then the person will fall prey to mithyatva, basically. Did you get that?
Yeah.
Correct. So that is the fourth Atichar, and the fifth Atichar is contact or being in close contact with Mithya Drashtis, or being in the company of Mithya Drashtis all the time. And this, in a way, you could say this is also the genesis of a lot of Atichars, because Shanka, Kanksha, all of these things can actually also stem from being in contact with a Mithya Drashti. See, the Jain scriptures are very clear, such as Updesh Mala, Shraddhavadi. They mention that a Shravak should stay in an area where there are fellow Shravaks, there are temples, there are Sadhu Bhagwans frequenting that area, and that is an ideal place. But when you live or when you spend time in the company of Mithya Drashtis, I don't think I need to elaborate much, because it is even known in our day-to-day life, when you are identified by the company you keep, by the kind of friends you keep around you, and the kind of people you hang out with also influences your thoughts to a very great degree. So for that reason, the contact of Mithya Drashtis is something that is very actively discouraged, and that is the fifth Atichar. Usually the prashansa of Mithya Drashtis and the contact of Mithya Drashtis, they go hand in hand. So that was the fourth, and this is the fifth one now. All right. Now, after looking at the 5 Atichars of Samyak Darshan, we'll move on to the kind of thoughts a Samyak Drashti has. So we'll move on to the state of mind that a Samyak Drashti is in constantly. We'll look at that, and then we'll move on to a rather important part, that is Darshanachar. Darshanachar is the achar, the conduct that is related to Samyak Darshan. There's an 8-fold conduct pertaining to Samyak Darshan. So we'll do that in the next session, but before that we need to look at what is the state of mind a Samyak Drashti Shravak has. So before we dive into that, please let me know if there are any questions with respect to any of the 5 Atichars.
One more doubt. So can we do prashansa of inanimate objects, like it's a nice book or?
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously. So when I say Mithya Drashtis, it refers to people of proponents or people of other faiths, essentially. Like we saw in the last session, publicly praising how Muslims have such great discipline when they offer their prayers, or consider something. I don't know, you take any example, how a particular event of a particular religion was very well organized, or how this particular religious leader, how the Pope is so cool, how he's so progressive and stuff like that. It could be anything. When it comes to general people, that's a different story altogether. It depends from person to person in that case. But when it comes to inanimate objects, I mean, there's no virtue in an inanimate object. It's just the appearance, taste, smell, or something of that sort. But I mean, Samyak Drashtis, otherwise they are full of Pramod Bhavna, because in the scriptures also, one day the gods, the Devatas, they were discussing how Krishna Maharaja has an attitude of only looking at good qualities of people and things. So people and animals, I meant. So I think what Indra or some other Devata did is, Krishna with his entourage, they were passing through a forest, and they placed a dead dog there, okay? A dead dog there with its mouth wide open. The body was decaying, it was rotting. And when they passed by, there's a strong, awful odor, So everyone covers their mouths, their noses, and everyone passes. Whereas Krishna, he doesn't do anything about it. He just walks by, and when he passes by the dog, he notices, he brings to everyone's notice, he says, the teeth of this dog are so are so, you know, proper. They're so intact and they're so nice. He praises the teeth of the dead dog. So he comments nothing about how the body is decaying, how the, you know, the carcass is rotting away, but he just points out what's good in it. So in that way, that's pramod bhavna. That's nice. There's nothing wrong about that. But when it comes to inanimate objects, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about, because objects generally, they don't have, I mean, let's say this pen, if I say that it's very nice or it's amazing, you should try it out, it's probably because of my rag. There's no gun in it, there's no virtue in it. Okay, it's just an external quality. There's nothing to do with the soul, because this is an inanimate, like you said. Did you get it?
Yeah, but if you say like Sachin is a good batsman, so that is rag or what is it?
You tell me, what do you think it is? I mean,
Yeah, he's possibly a mithya drishti. So in
No, I
that
mean-
sense,
not even in that sense. It also shows what our attitude is about. So this virtue of him being a good batsman is not going to help him or anyone in the spiritual manner. It's just a skill he has as opposed to a quality that he has, you know. It's not a virtue that he has. It's not a gun. It's a skill.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, these are, in short, the 5 Atichars of Samadarshan, and we need to be careful not to fall prey to these. And when we fall prey to these, we should have our ways handy about how to, you know, get out of them ASAP. Okay. So having spoken about that, we'll just briefly we'll start discussing the impact Samyak Darshan has on a person. Now, we know that Samyak Darshan is the fundamental of every religion, and by every religion I meant every element of religion, sorry. And although it is very important, we need to realize before we move on that Samyak Darshan is a means and not an end by itself. It is a means to attain Samyak Dhyan and Samyak Charitra and eventually attain moksha. Because without having Samyak Darshan, your Jnana and Charitra are both mithya. They're both false. So it is Samyak Darshan that makes both of these qualities Samyak. Now, the immediate cause of moksha is obviously Samyak Charitra and not Samyak Darshan when we speak of the immediate cause. Because when a person goes to moksha, we don't highlight how he was Samyak Drashti, but we highlight how he had attained Samyak Charitra. And this Samyak Charitra is a quality that it's a of the three of the Ratnatrayi. This is both of these things, Samyak Dhyan and Samyak Charitra, are two important aspects that a Samayajee person wishes for constantly, because he knows that just Samyak Darshan alone won't help him. So he's, trying his best to pursue both Samyak Dhyan and Samyak Charitra to the best of his ability. And the more he strives for it, the more karma he shatters and suppresses, and eventually he attains all of these things. So we'll look at that for now, because Samyak Darshan, the impact of Samyak Darshan is a very huge topic, but there's a few examples that I'd like to discuss. The first one that comes to mind is the story of the incident of, when Ravan is on Ashtapad, Mount Ashtapad. Bharat Chakravarti, the son of Adinath Bhagwan, has created a magnificent temple there called Sihanashadya Prasad. And Ravan with his wife Manjodari, they were doing bhakti. Now, I think Manjodari is dancing and Ravan is playing the veena. He is very proficient at it. And one of the strings of the veena breaks. Ravan is a Vidyadhar. So he he focuses, he has different vidyas, so he continues to focus on Jin Bhakti, and as soon as the string breaks, he uses his vidya to extract a vein from his own body and tie it to the end of the string, and he continues to play play the veena. And at that point, the bhakti that he did, it was so intense that he did the Nikachna of Tirthankar Nam Karma, which I said Nikachna because after at times people don't always do Nikachna of Tirthankar Nam Karma. We discussed earlier that there are different intensities with which karma is bound to the soul. So when you have very intense feelings, the karma becomes nikachit, which means that it is difficult to get rid of. And similarly, when you do nikachna of Tirthankar Ram karma, it almost becomes guaranteed that you won't part with this karma, so you're definitely going to end up becoming a Tirthankar now. And all of this we can attribute it to the Samyak Darshan. Further, when the war of the Ramayana, like when the war in Lanka is started already, Ravan needs to do the sadhana, he needs to attain a vidya called Bahurupini Vidya, which is essential to him, he thinks it is essential to him in winning that war. Now to do that, you need to do job, you need to have a good environment, and you obviously need a recharged, ambience around you. So he chooses to do this in his Ghar Derasar. Okay. Now, obviously the Ghar Derasar, it's a Derasar, so the presiding deity is Tirthankar Paramatma and no one else. And he had Shantinath Bhagwan, Derasar of Shantinath Bhagwan in his place. The description of this temple is so mind-blowing in Trishashi Sharakapurush and other scriptures. The floor was completely made of jewels, and the way the Pratima is described and so on, it's very beautiful. In fact, when Ram eventually won over Lanka, when he conquered Lanka, the first thing that Ram did was visit Ravan's Ghar Derasar and, do darshan there. So this is the importance that Samyadashis have for God, for Bhagwan's Pratima, for Bhagwan's Agams, for Bhagwan's Sadhu Sadhis, and for Bhagwan's Shravaks and Shravakas. I think even if you read in detail the Ramayana alone, the Jain Ramayana alone, you'll get to know of all of these concepts so well, because each of these concepts come into play at one point or the other. Now, Ravan is in the Derasar. He's about to begin his sadhana for the concerned Vidya. And to do that, he needs to have some kind of, there's this idol of Shantinath Bhagwan right in front of him, so he can't ignore it. So he prays to Paramatma first. And the verses which he utters before Paramatma, they are all recorded in Trishashi Shalakapurush Charitra. So these few verses, I think there's about 10 to 15 verses, I'm not very sure. They are so beautiful when you read them. They express, they very clearly convey the kind of devotion that he had for Arihant Bhagwan. And even though he's in a very terrible situation right now, he's almost about to, lose all of his army and all of his forces. And in such a mentally, in such a state of conflict and turbulence, he does not ask Paramatma for any kind of materialistic stuff. Not at all. In all of those shlokas that I mentioned, when he prays to Shantinath Bhagwan, not even once does he ask for anything of that sort. He doesn't ask for this vidya, or he doesn't want to, he doesn't ask for victory in the war, nothing at all. Later on, he chooses one section and then he does his vidya sadhana there, so that's different. But when he's in front of Tirthankar Paramatma, he doesn't do anything of the sort at all. And that shows us how firm he was in his Samyak Darshan. So this is one example of Ravan. Similarly,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, please.
Yes, so you mentioned everything about Ravan. So, but he had this Samyak Darshan, but he also had other characteristics which led him further away from what our religion says. Like Ram gave him chance to avoid the war and completely surrender himself to Ram. So instead of that, he should have chosen that to, instead of fighting, he should have chosen like, I should surrender, if he really believed in this.
Now, everyone who has Samyak Darshan does need not have every other virtue, because there are so many Samyadashi kings who have fought the bloodiest of wars and who have died and gone to bad places eventually too. The point here is Ravan. So when I said that in the Raman is very open about both characteristics of Ravan. Purvacharyas have given two titles to Ravan. One is Mahatma, the great soul. Other is Paramarhat, the supreme Shravak. This is with reference to some neglecting his bad qualities. Of course, there were bad qualities. But another thing that you need to understand here is, just a few minutes ago, we discussed the concept of Niyanu, wherein you trade off your, dharma for materialistic benefits. So Ravan became a Prativasudev. Ravan became Ravan, like the position that he attained of a Prativasudev. He attained that position because in the past he had traded dharma for something so petty, for, having such a huge empire or whatever. And as a result of that, he cocked up so bad. But of course, again, he is to be blamed for that. But when we are discussing his Samyak Darshan, we have to admit that his Samyak Darshan was way, way, way better than us. And even though he messed up, if we just take the qualities that he had and be cautious about, how not to fall for the bad things that he did, we can attain our own spiritual welfare. There are mentions where Ravan pays no heed to the words of a Sadhu Bhagwant, and there are quite a few mentions in such cases, but we cannot do much about it. And these are facts. The scriptures have been open enough to mention both good and bad things. Now, coming to the part where you said he should have surrendered to Ram or whatever, yeah, I mean, he pretty much could have. He could have handed Sita over, but that is when his man kasha, his ego and his lust blinded him, which is why we, in the previous sessions, we had discussed that even a Samyadashi Shravak has to be careful at all times to ensure that kasha is Krodh, Man, Maya, Lobh, they don't get the best of him. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Similarly, we also show the bad points, the bad characteristics that Mavar Swami Bhagwan had in his previous life, or any kind of Tirthankar for that matter. We also talk about how Rishabdev Paramatma tied the ox's mouth for, about a certain 13 something, and as a result he had to fast for 13 months. How Mavar Swami Bhagwan preached falsely. He just made one false statement against the scriptures in his third birth, and in his final 27th birth, his journey got prolonged by an infinite span of time. So we're pretty open about it. The point is, it's not necessary that we cannot take good qualities from people like them too, because we are doing this we're doing this in a very neutral and impartial manner. So, yeah.
Pasha, how come there is first or third birth of Mahavi? It would have been endless in the negative infinity.
Right. So, okay. Sorry. What you were saying? No, not Tirthankar Ram Karma. We mentioned this in the first session about Samyak Darshan too. And Deep Vijayaji Maharaj, the poet monk, in his Satyavis Bhavnu Stavan, he explains it in very simple Gujarati too. He writes, that even Tirthankar's births are counted from the moment when they first attained Samyak Darshan. I think I specified it twice. I hope you can recall it now. The Jeev has infinite births, but we recall it from, the moment when they first attain Samyak Darshan. The process that we saw in the previous sessions about when an Anadi Mityadrishti, a person who has been Mityadrishti for an eternity, first attains Samyak Darshan, the same process even Tirthankar souls, they go through the same process, and as a result, they their births are also counted from the moment when they first attain Samyak Darshan. After that, they lose Samyak Darshan too. Like Mahavir Bhagwan lost his Samyak Darshan as well. But we counted from the time when he first attained Samyak Darshan, and we take the main births that are relevant. So with that manner, we have 27 births of Mahavir Swami, 10 births of Parshvanath Bhagwan, and so on. Otherwise, everyone has had infinite births.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Are there any questions now?
Is the prohibition of Prashansa only applicable for Mithyadrashti?
What do you mean?
I mean, can we do Prashansa of Samyak Drashti Jeev, or we should not do Prashansa at all?
Oh, of course, we should do Prashansa of Samyak Rashi Jeevs. I mean,
even if they have bad qualities with them?
Yes. So that again depends now. What kind of bad qualities are you talking about? That's the first question. What do you have in mind when you ask me this?
Just like Ravan. We do Prashansa of Ravan. But,
So when we do that, we show both good and bad qualities. We also show that he messed up in this manner and that manner, and so on. But there's no point of being misled, because the main character that is of a person has is whether he has Samyak Darshan or not. Because when a Samyak Darshan, see, understand this, because a Samayajri person, even if he has bad qualities, that Samayajri person understands that I have bad qualities, and he's remorseful of that. He's trying his best to get over it. Whereas a Mityadrishti Jeev, he doesn't even have a clear idea about what qualities are good qualities and which ones are bad qualities. So even if a Mityadrishti person has good qualities, then he won't be able to put them to much use. Do you understand it?
yeah.
Yeah. So that's how exactly it works. Otherwise, in generally speaking, praising sadharmics, for example, Samayajri Jeev, when we say, is important. It's super important, because it also encourages your fellow giants to do better, and the same for Guru Bhagwans and for other people. Everyone has tiny vices in them till they are Chadmas, they haven't attained Kevalgyan, and they're imperfect before that. But at that point, you can praise them, because even if people go to them, they will learn the truth, they will learn the true marg. So there's no harm in doing that at all.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, all right. Are there any more questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll pause here for now. This is earlier as compared to our usual sessions, but the later part I want to discuss is a bit not technical, but kind of long. So we'll get to it on next Saturday. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Good night and pranam.
Thank you. Good night.